Welcome to SAM Conversation, a program of South Asia Monitor. It's a pleasure to welcome Lt Gen Subrata Saha, former Deputy Chief of Army Staff, and Sanjay Kulkarni, former Director General Infantry, and also a pleasure to welcome Mr. Snehesh Philip, Senior Associate Editor, The Print. Now we have yet another ceasefire in the offing with Pakistan. And this is after about 3,800 ceasefire violations in the year 2020, during when the whole world has been, combating this biological weapon experimentation of China, COVID. In this year itself, it's the third month, and the violations go into a few hundreds. If any ceasefire with Pakistan stands, I think a lot of people benefit in Pakistan particularly, and also in India, very much so. Our entire border belt. But given Pakistan's track record, all I can say is that it remains to be seen how it's going to be implemented. I'll not dwell much on it. General Saha, what do you have to say about this?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Colonel Bhat, for giving this opportunity to me. You see, first, I think we need to accept the fact that this terminology ceasefire violation was quite a misnomer. You know, if you're talking about 3,000 ceasefire violations in 1 year, where is the ceasefire? You're talking about, in terms of 10 ceasefire violations per day. So really speaking, I think the 2003 ceasefire over a period of time had lost its relevance, and we were quite witnessing the kind of casualties that were happening on civilians, and we know it for a fact, having commanded 15 Corps myself. When the ceasefire violations are there, they have very clear objectives of why they want to engage in that ceasefire. First, as is well known, it is to push the terrorists into India. Let's not have any doubts on that. Second, it is to intimidate the civilian population that is living along the line of control, and by intimidating them, create pressure on the Indian government, on the Indian security forces and others who are operating over there. So build a sort of narrative that puts pressure on the security forces, puts pressure on the government over there to tell the forces to calm down. So that is broadly the strategy. And this year, and in the last year, 2020, you could see there was an emboldening that was taking place, because they thought that Pakistan army thought that because of what's happening along the line of actual control in eastern Ladakh, they could, exert some pressure on India. Whether it was happening at the behest, in collaboration, that's a matter of a separate debate with the PLA, with China. But the fact of the matter is, from a Pakistani perspective, it would be, very, very naive to say that that was not a factor in the reckoning, because they have always taken advantage of such situations in the past. Okay, and today, as we speak, we are in the 50th year of the Pakistan's genocide in East Pakistan, erstwhile East Pakistan, Bangladesh. Do I need to qualify or amplify anything more on the psyche of the predominant predominant lot in the Pakistan military on how they are thinking? So now that they have chosen, I say they have chosen to, first put out that statement that we should be extending a hand of, peace in all directions. Obviously, there are pressures within Pakistan, which is compelling it to go. And I would not say that there aren't advantages for India in in agreeing to what has come about. How it has come about, I'm sure you'll bring it up in the course of the discussion. I don't need to go there. And like you yourself said, there are advantages for India. And because it helps us to achieve what we are wanting to achieve post the repeal of Article 370 much better, because all of us who have served in that area know it very well that peace along the line of control does one way or the other influence the overall conditions which are there in the hinterland. So therefore, I think it is just as well, just good that this has come about. And
Yes,
like
no,
you are
no doubt.
quite suspecting on how long will it last, how will it be implemented, very valid concerns, and we can talk more about that. So I think so much for now. It's back to you, sir.
Sanjay, what do you have to add to your thoughts on this yet another ceasefire?
There's very little to add when someone like Gen Subrata being with 15 Corps, full grip of the situation, and has been saying what he's saying a lot because he says all of it from his own experience. Now, what is definitely, it's an opportunity. It's something that welcome step, no denying the fact. But let not be carried away with what Pakistan or the two armies have decided to go in for a ceasefire agreement, though not in writing. It's only an agreement which has been spoken of. And even in 2003, and ever since it has held on to only a place called in general area of Siachen. It hasn't held on anywhere else. Why it is held on there? Because from 2003 onwards, the amount of CPEC and the amount of work that the Chinese had to do in the complete Pak-occupied Kashmir, and especially when the thing was to run along Gilgit and much closer to Skardu, they insisted that it should be held on from 2003, and that has helped both Pakistan and China. Obviously, it has helped us because there are no casualties, at least from firing in that general area. But having said that, now 2003 onwards and beyond, like you all rightly said, 3,000, there are over 13,000 ceasefire violations since 2003, and 92% have taken place after 2014. If that be the statistics of 13,000 ceasefire violations, obviously it's not a ceasefire. It's just playing with fire rather than saying ceasefire. If that be so, why do we think that Pakistan and all along everybody would be saying that look, all agreements with Pakistan will only hold on if Pakistan army is involved. That is the general perception that if the Pakistan army is not involved, nothing can hold on because the Pak army calls the shots. Now, even if it's a similar agreement or any agreement that may have taken place when they were with political this thing, they have not been able to hold on to it. The Pak army genuinely was not involved or didn't want to get involved. Now, this agreement, when the agreement is between the two DGMOs, again, obviously there's a hidden agenda behind this entire thing. We must use of this opportunity. It doesn't matter what their hidden agenda is. The hidden agenda could be that obviously the Pakistanis are under pressure to be able to settle with Taliban, to be able to get United States. Whole thing. I say, if that be so, Pakistanis are looking at it that, well, having got its foothold in Afghanistan, they release the entire Taliban, and that entire Taliban is to be released, obviously, onto Kashmir. Pakistan is going to say, well, we are not involved. The entire thing, whatever is happening in Kashmir, we are not involved. So if you're looking at the ultimate, what is it that you're looking for? A ceasefire agreement? Oh, there would be no terrorism, just not stopping of the fire, no terrorism. And that is where the question mark is.
Thank you, General Kulkarni. Significantly, this ceasefire, which began in 2003, was it involved the chief executive of Pakistan, or the fourth dictator president, Musharraf, and it did hold for some time. Snehesh, you have written a lot, you've commented a lot on these affairs. Your thoughts?
Thank you so much, Colonel Bhatt, for inviting me over. I'm actually quite pessimist when it comes to Indo-Pak relations, especially when it is a Pak military which is in play. I think the first, and the first time we actually attempted the ceasefire, as you said, was way back in 2003. Since then, we've tried it multiple times. I still remember I was posted in Pakistan, in Islamabad, in 2013, when the then Indian DGMO, Lt Gen Bhatia, sir, had come for the first time. It crossed over the Wagah border, and he had entered Pakistan. So at that time also there was effort that was done to ensure that the ceasefire is maintained. And it was once again attempted in 2018. Then also there was a joint statement that was issued by both the sides, focusing on ceasefire, to end the ceasefire violations, which actually didn't last very long. So this is yet another attempt that has taken place. It's a good thing that from the time that they have announced, no ceasefire violations have taken place. And as Lieutenant General Saha rightly mentioned, these cannot be called ceasefire violations. For example, if you look at the figures of 2020, there has been over 5,000 ceasefire violations by Pakistan, which is actually more than 10 per day. So it is something which is beneficial for both countries if there is a ceasefire in place. However, I'm skeptical about how long will it last. Everybody says that the Pakistan army is powerful. They need to be on board. They are on board this time, but they've been on board earlier also. So, while I was in Pakistan, I learned one thing, and I say this pretty often is, there is an ISI within the ISI in Pakistan. It's not the Pakistan army chief who is the main control figure in Pakistan. It is the deep state in Pakistan which works on its own agenda. And every time India and Pakistan have tried peace at political level, at military level, the deep state of Pakistan has always struck. So I'm just hoping that I'm proved wrong, and this peace, this proposed peace at the LC would last longer.
Well, one reason that this ceasefire or the process or the attempt for the ceasefire may have come about is that Pakistan army has lost, has suffered in a lot of these confrontations. I think they got it pretty bad. They got a pretty bad walloping by the Indian army, and we should not be pulling our punches anyway with Pakistan. General Saha, you had a very eventful period of you're commanding the 15 Corps. I'm sure you've been watching what has been happening after your tenure of command also. Now, how effective do you think this is going to be? The 2003 ceasefire held for, at least a couple of years. 2 years, I can say, I think it held. What about this one in your estimation?
You see, in 2003, one was, when they had met on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, and that is where this agreement, or I would say this understanding had come about, that between our Prime Minister and Musharraf, that a certain amount of confidence building measures must be put in place. Post whatever had happened prior to that, I don't want to go into the nuts and bolts of that. But that was, I think, a significant meeting in September 2003. And November 2003, we heard of this, declaration of ceasefire and what have you. And that was followed by a lot of, attempt to like that 4-point formula and what have you. So all kinds of things Musharraf had experimented. Just as we saw the thing starting to wane, and then like this point about the deep state again getting back to its old agenda, and then we saw that Mumbai, So where was the question? Where was the question of that sustaining? That ceasefire sustaining in any sense. So, well, anyway, obviously, while you take lessons from the past, they do not necessarily apply to the present. Today, if you see, from a Pakistani point of view, on the West, they are in trouble, okay? They are taking casualties, and if you take the casualty statistics of what's happening on their Eastern Front and compare it with their Western Front, they aren't particularly different. Then there is a contest which is going on in Balochistan. And then there is this huge responsibility which they want to undertake with regard to peace in Afghanistan, along with the attendant uncertainty that comes about it. So if you compare the matrix of certainty, uncertainty, possibility of stability or instability, it is a lot easier for Pakistan to deal with a responsible India on its east than to deal with the uncertainties on the west. Okay, if you move away from the military front, if you go into the dynamics of economics, we are all aware of the kind of pressures which are there from the FATF. And there is that constant urge on how to, make an impact on the international committee or international community on the sense of responsibility and so on. And add to all this is the gross mishandling of COVID within Pakistan. I mean, it was treated as if nothing has happened, to suddenly waking up, they kept swinging from one end to the other end all through and through. All of it put together is creating a lot of instability within the internal politics of Pakistan. So if you look at the triangle of politics, security, and economics, out of all the ends that they were dealing with, I think the easiest was to deal with India. So therefore, they have gone in for this. They have sought it. And I'm not for a moment saying that it does not benefit India. It does benefit India. Okay, that said, till such time as we were troubled in eastern Ladakh, they seem to be going pretty fine. Moment they saw now that is off, so start making noises. Again, I go back to what I said in my first set of remarks. Whether at the behest of China or not, we need not go there. But I'm seeing it purely from the point of view of Pakistan. So for as long as these pressures are there, on them to hold back, I think the ceasefire should hold. But should that pressure recede in some form or the other, or should pressures within that deep state start seeing a potential of long-term stability with India? Again, you will see trouble coming in from Pakistan side. So I think we need to be very, very cautious and not get taken in by any of these overtures so easily. Each step has to be, seen through and examined very well.
Point taken, General Saab, point taken. And in fact, even as we speak, I'm sure there is some activity of terrorists who are already there in the valley, on. Just, I think, 2-3 days ago, there was an incident. You see, it is a very old ploy of Pakistan, of, its army saying, okay, we have, we've had a ceasefire, but the pumping in of terrorists does not stop.
See, that is
we may have lined the line of control or the border with barbed wire, what have you, all kinds of devices. I don't know how many tunnels they've dug.
See, very recently, the Ministry of Home Affairs has released the figures of terrorists killed. Okay, in all of 2019, there were 157 terrorists killed, and in 2020, there were 221 terrorists killed. So, and these terrorists killed are a combination of what is in the hinterland, what is on the line of control.
Yes.
And this year, if I'm not mistaken, the figure is, I think, 12 so far. So if that is the statistic, nothing has changed. Okay, and it is not only about terrorists. You see, you have to also see what is happening in the in the domain of stone pelting. I think soon after the ceasefire, the very first Friday, after a long time, there were reports of stone pelting outside Jama Masjid in Srinagar. So therefore,
not only that, they've been targeting Hindus now. That's another new or a new ploy now. I mean, enough of it was done in the past. Gen Kulkarni, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah,
please.
Yeah. See, what happens is, as I see this entire ceasefire, it's definitely to the benefit of both the countries. There's no denying the fact. It definitely is for the bigger benefit of those who are staying along the 300-kilometer long LOC. No doubt about that. Obviously, every now and then, ceasefire is violated. The poor villagers are running around, getting into the underground bunkers, protecting their lives. The cattle is at risk, they are at risk, everything. All that is stopped. Definitely, it would be a big advantage. Of course, we now need to take seat to it. How is it that we can stop? What is the purpose of it? Now, the purpose of it is to ensure that, of course, the militants aren't pushed in because of the ceasefire violation. The militants are. But when you look at it again, as from the terrorism point of view, where is now is the relationship that exists, because the army can bring to a large extent normalcy. The normalcy, not once, it has been attempted a number of times. And a lot of winning hearts and minds have been done in the valley. The Sadbhavna, I'm sure General Subrata knows himself how much he did at that point of time, and it was virtually at its peak to have won the hearts and minds of people. Followed immediately, you had General Atta Snehesh, then followed by General Subrata, and it was wonders. The things were suddenly you find you bring normalcy. You allow South Kashmir to go on. You have Burhan Wani coming up in that particular context. Again, the whole thing, goes out of hand. So you realize that Pakistan is Kashmir obsession, India hatred, armies control. That is where the Pakistan is all about. When it's Kashmir obsession and India hatred, they will try all means to ensure that India remains unsettled. And now, with both Pakistan and China together, the basic purpose is unsettling. Now, at all times, when you look at it, you find the political leadership in the valley. What does the political leadership do? Always and every time say, Pakistan must be spoken to, Pakistan must do it. So much so that even they've said, we will take the help of China for restoration of the Article 370. This is the kind of political leadership that we have in the valley. If this is the political leadership, however much the ceasefire violation may stop for some time, use this as an opportunity for so many things to win hearts and minds. But the real purpose is, how do we turn around the people of the valley who don't look anywhere else but towards us, and at all times take it as us and see us themselves as part of this country and not a part of another country or a part of somewhere else? That is where the whole thing lies. Now, where Pakistan is succeeding to some extent, I would say, is being able to use the internet, being able to use the mobile, use all kinds of connectivity to ensure that the local now slowly and steadily groom. The sleeper cells are suddenly brought into this thing now, because they cannot pump in most of these foreign terrorists themselves. They're using the locals all around. And now that is where we really need to have our upper hand. We need to have our eyes and ears everywhere. And we have to fight the narrative that Pakistan has been wanting to fight it elsewhere. Pakistan today is isolated. Pakistan today, because of the Financial Action Task Force, is in a dire economic crisis. They don't know what to do. Terror funding is what they're used to, and they've been totally said or involved in terror funding. FATF, no way, grey list. Next is blacklist. So that is the pressure. We have to see what we can do in Kashmir to ensure and wean away the people from looking at Pakistan. Ceasefire being held on. Excellent. That will speak of good relations between the two countries. At least the villagers all along the LOC of 300 kilometers will have some safety. But how do we handle this small community of the Kashmiris and in the valley, highly densely populated? Where is the population? Everywhere, such densely populated areas. Only find hills and mountains are left open. Otherwise, and it is in this density that I feel we need to do something to be able to win the hearts and minds in a genuine manner, so that they're weaned away totally from Pakistan.
Snehesh, you are one person who's had a very a lot of opportunities to interact with the civilian population in the valley, and you've I think you've covered a lot of post abrogation of 370. You covered that period quite a bit. How much do you think, I mean, the government can claim, oh, everything is hunky-dory. There is no doubt about the fact that I think whether it was the PDP or the National Conference, they were taking us for a ride. Of that, there is no doubt. But there have been voices after the abrogation that, oh, it's not, not fair, not legal. Most of us who served in the armed forces, we've got no doubts. Most of us who know India, Pakistan very well, have no doubts. But I think what comes from you will be very significant because you've been in and out, and your thoughts, please.
See, as far as Kashmir is concerned, there is no doubt about the fact that, the army through the Sadbhavna scheme have pumped in crores over the years. Lieutenant Gen Saha, when he was the corps commander at that time, the Sadbhavna scheme was at the highest in terms of reaching out to the people is concerned. But post the abrogation of Article 370, the fact is that yes, there are people who are concerned that they feel cheated, they feel let down, but there are a good number of people also who are okay with this removal of this Article 370. At the end of the day, what they're looking for, every person, be it any part of the world, at the end of the day, he is looking for a job, education for his children, normal life. I think the big focus that has to be there is development on the ground. There needs to be a visible development, a visible change, for people to understand that, yes, because of the removal of Article 370, because of the changes that have been brought about, there is development happening in my life. So the visible development things have to be done, and that is, while the work goes on the larger scheme of things of changing the whole the process that is there in Kashmir, I think a visible development needs to take place on the ground. Visible development can be, you could just start building up, start construction of a particular, and these were some of the points that I actually gave in one of the interactions with select people after my visit to Kashmir, was the fact that, you could even start a general a construction of a bridge. The bridge might take, the next 3 to 4 years or 5 years for, those bridges to be completed. But the mere fact of seeing a construction beginning at maybe a congested spot, maybe an area where, people get troubled by, is a visible development that takes place. I think that should be a very key focus. And, as far as this ceasefire violation is concerned, there was recent images that came out of children along the LOC, children from the villages studying in their schools in the courtyard, sitting out in the open and, studying with other children. These were wonderful pictures that came out. But however, again, as I said, I'm just skeptical. Right now it is the month of March, which has just begun. This is not the time for infiltration of terrorists. Both Gen Kulkarni and General Saha would say it is only towards the April, May when the infiltration happens. And that's when we'll have to see, whether the ceasefire, this agreement to have the ceasefire remains
has had effect or not. Yeah.
Back to you, sir.
But the fact remains that even in these very, in the thick of winter, the activity never stopped.
Yeah.
That is, and even after the announcement of this overture or this, proposal for a ceasefire, activity has not stopped. I don't want to be sounding like a cynic, I think we are all in the, we all would like there to be actual peace. The Indian Army has been in a state of war 24/7. Closing comments, General Saha.
Okay, so to kind of wrap up, since we are talking specifically the after effects of this ceasefire, violation over here, I think we'll have to see it in a continuum of activities that we are going to see. Post the repeal of Article 370, there was a bringing down of the diplomatic relations which was there between our two countries. Nothing has happened on that score as yet. We have spoken about what's happening if indeed we are almost 1 week down. If indeed there was, an intensity or an urgency to do it, by now we should have seen some, steps towards restoration of the diplomatic relations. That remains to be seen, number one. The second thing is situation on the ground. All of you have spoken about. We have to see how it pans out. And I think we have to see the larger context also now that the US has decided to, review its plans from Afghanistan. So how critical is Pakistan's conduct with respect to Afghanistan is also going to be a key factor, from an earlier decision to, okay, just cut and pull irrespective of what the ground situation is. Now the review seems to suggest a more, shall we say, balanced appraisal of the situation, a balanced review of Pakistan's conduct and how is it, delivering on what it is promising. So all this is certainly going to have an impact on the way Pakistan is going to conduct itself. From the Chinese perspective, the BRI or the CPEC is becoming all the more critical day by day. Within weeks of taking over as the president, the first thing that he's reaching out for is to have a summit of the Quad. Now, this is something which you may have seen what the state-sponsored media in China is saying. It is already critical of the Quad that, look, this can't happen because all the countries are more interested in themselves. So the fact that they are coming out with something like this does give out the message that is, going into China. So therefore, if the Quad starts to move in a certain direction, in a positive direction, obviously there is pressure on China. If there is pressure on China, there is an urgency to get the CPEC going forward. So we have to see it in the larger context on what are going to be the checks and balances on Pakistan to see how the whole thing unfolds. And I'm not surprised at all that India has, started taking certain initiatives in terms of, sort of reviving, I won't say reviving, reinvigorating what it is doing in Chabahar and things like that, and with the Central Asian republics and all. So all in all, I think it depends on how this country can be kept under check and how can its future maneuvers be pressurized to get back on track, which, well, at this point is watchful and both wishful thinking. So on that note, I will stop.
General Kulkarni, very briefly, if you could please wrap up.
Just 2-3 things, Colonel Bhat. First, of course, cautious optimism. We can't be complacent. We must be very careful, and we must first don't change their spots. And therefore, we must utilize this time in the valley to win heart and mind, which we've been at it for so many years. And let me tell you to what Philip has said as regards the employment is concerned. I've been there operating as company commander, even as late as the commanding officers, and of course, after that, I was more onto the eastern side. I have seen mothers and daughters delivering their babies at the same time at around just a month. If that be the rate at which they're exploding the population, however hard the abrogation, whatever you might do, if everybody is looking for jobs, they also have a responsibility to ensure that the families remain restricted. You cannot have in a family 10 to 12 people and all of them demanding jobs, and all those are well off. Do get them. But if each one of them get it, it's impossible. No country can afford it, and it's just going beyond it. Yeah.
Snehesh.
Yes, sir. So just responding to what General Kulkarni said, I didn't mean job for every single person. I meant in terms of economy revival, the tourist industry, people coming and setting up, factories, setting up places. But for all that to happen, the security also needs to be there. So it's very interlinked to each other. As far as this ceasefire is concerned, I think as General Saha said, I feel that this is one of the initial steps that have been taken by the both sides for possible normalization of relationship, which right now is at a very low level in terms of diplomatic relations. This ceasefire agreement has not come out of nowhere. It is followed by months and weeks of background level talks that were held at different levels. I'm not saying at just one level. I know for the fact that certain people met in a third country to iron out the differences. So there's a lot that is happening. I think as General Kulkarni sir said, it's cautious optimism. It is hopeful that things will stabilize. I've always said that I'm not expecting India and Pakistan to become the best of friends, but at least we can be good neighbors. Good neighbors, we don't poke into each other's affair. We live our life, they live their life. Cautious optimism.
And I think I will conclude by saying that although very, very often one has been, very cynical about how can there be talks on the table when there's terror on the terrain. But I still go by, this gentleman Ali Sardar Jafri, who said, Guftagu jari rahe. You know, let that window be open.
Absolutely.
He had a longish couplet on it, which has been translated in English also in this book. But we've never refused talks. We've always had them. I only hope that the time comes when Pakistan realizes that enough is enough. They lost Bangladesh. I don't know what may happen to in the in the years to come. What may happen to what remains of only West Pakistan now. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your valuable inputs. All the best.
Thank you, sir.